Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new build video with me, Sherman. By request, somebody asked me to do a solo Nightblade, Magicka Nightblade, and I did, and it is called the Reaper. Now, this build is a solo build used for soloing delves, public dungeons, dolmens, world bosses, not all of them, but most of them. Normal dungeons you can solo, most of them, not all of them, and then some vet dungeons. Now, this build also works in Maelstrom Arena, in normal and in vet if you're good enough. So you have to become comfortable with the build first before it will work. So right now we're at a world boss. I'm going to take on this world boss in a minute, but I want to show you the build itself. So that's what the build's used for. It's a solo build. It's not made for group play. If you want to play in groups as a tank, you can, but you can mainly use it for tanking normal dungeons and most of the vet dungeons, like the Path 1, Path 2 dungeons. Some of the DLC dungeons, some will be a little bit more difficult, but you can use it. I would suggest, if you are going to do that, switch this staff here from an Inferno Master Staff into an Ice Master Staff if you're going to tank dungeons. Because the Nightblade needs a ice staff in order for it to work really well in that kind of environment. And you need it on the front bar. So let's go ahead and take a look at the stats here. We have a 35k Magicka with a 26k health, 12k stamina. We do have a 14k recovery and a 2100 spell damage. Now this does get increased when we use a certain ability. We'll get to that. And then we have a 41% spell critical. Our spell resistance is 20k with a physical resistance of 19k. We are running the Lady Mundus stone for increased resistances. We do have Major Prophecy on both bars from Inner Light, and we do also use Witchmother's Potent Brew for the health recovery and the max Magicka max health. So that's what it gives us. And for pots, I would suggest using spell power pots or using tri-stat pots to give you resources back, because you're going to go through a lot of different resources with this build. You will be blocking some attacks, not all, but some. And if you are going to be soloing in a dungeon, I would suggest tri-stat food. It's going to give you a little bit more Magicka, a little bit more health, and a little bit more stamina, so you can block those attacks. You are going to lose recovery. This is why you want to use a power pot or a tri-stat pot, so you can get that magic recovery up a little bit while you're in a dungeon. When you're solo playing, just use the Witchmother's Brew. It works the best. Now, I also have on here the dual stat food, which you can use. It's going to give you more Magicka stamina. That's what I would use if I was in Cyrodiil or something, solo playing. So, let's go ahead and take a look at the gear. The gear sets we're running is a 2-piece Valkyn Skoria, in medium and heavy, and on the medium helmet is infused, the heavy shoulders reinforced. Now, Skoria is really good because it does give you a little bit of extra health, but it does do an amazing amount of damage if it procs. Now, this is a lower proc set, but it does work really good with Nightblade. The other sets that I would suggest running if you're not running this is Elombris, Grothdar, or Nirnhoned. Those are really good sets. There is a new set called Zans, which is really good for this build if you want to run that as well, but not something I would suggest. Grothdar is something I would suggest if you want to be up close and personal all the time. So, the next set we're running is a 5-piece heavy Julianos, and the reason why we're wearing heavy armor is to get our resistances up there. We don't want to get them too high because we're not a main tank or tanking, things. We are playing solo. So when you play solo, you don't need a tank. You need to be tanky. So this helps you be tanky, and it gives you a good amount of crit with a good amount of spell damage. So that's why we kind of use this setup. We are wearing a 5-piece heavy, like I said. So one of our 5-piece heavy is the shoulders of Valkyn Skoria. The rest is the boots, the legs, the gauntlets, and the chest. Now, if you notice, the big pieces have tri-stats in them, and they're all infused. The smaller pieces on the shoulders, the boots, are reinforced. These pieces are Nirnhoned. Now, our belt is light, and it is also Nirnhoned. This is going to give us the greater resistances that we can get out of our gear. Now, why are we building for resistance and not like sturdy to block? Because we're not block builds. We're using damage shields to mitigate damage, and we use those a lot. We're going to keep those up as much as possible. And that's the other reason why I suggest using an ice staff. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab an ice staff here from the master section. Oops, wrong one. Master destruction staff. We're going to go ahead and grab the master ice staff, because this is a really good staff to use, and you want to make sure that it's infused, and you want to make sure that it has a crusher enchant. If you don't have a crusher enchant, don't stress it. You can use a hardening enchant too to give you a damage shield. And we're going to go ahead and put the hardening on here. Now the reason why we want to use an ice staff on the front bar is because it has a taunt. So if we're playing solo, even by ourselves, having a taunt there is just fine. But the reason we also want to use an ice staff is for the ability to lock enemies down and keep them in place. Now you can use an ice staff on the back bar or the front bar, it's up to you. I prefer this setup because it works out better. So the sets here, the 3-piece jewelry set we're running is a willpower set with 1 magic recovery, 2 weapon or spell damage. Now I would suggest, if you can get this on live, go healthy instead of arcane, because then you can go in here and you can make these arcane, or make these Magicka glyphs instead of health glyphs. So that's what it allows you to do, is make this, and you will end up with about the same amount of max Magicka and max health. So. And if you notice, when I swap bars, my magic and stuff changes. That's because on my back bar, I actually have something to increase my max Magicka and something that increases my max health. So, normally 34, 25. Alrighty, so onto the staves. We're going to run 2 infused staves, 1 a master staff. This is going to increase our destructive touch ability. The damage by 2,000 on the main hit, and it's also going to reduce the cost of it. This, we're going to run a Maelstrom staff. This is going to increase our light and heavy attack damage in our wall of elements. Now we are using a lightning wall, and you can use a fire staff here if you want to, or an ice staff with a fire staff main bar. With the Nightblade, they're really flexible, but I just prefer this setup. Alright. So moving on to the skills. Now with skills, you just mainly want to make sure you get all your class passives first off. Make sure you unlock all your class passives, and you want to max them out. And the reason why is because you're using a lot of class abilities, as you can see. So you are using class abilities, you want to get those class passives. Now onto the weapons, you want to make sure that you get the destruction staff passives. And then armor skills. Light armor, you just need the top 3. Medium armor, you just need the top 2 and the bottom 1. And then with heavy armor, you need all of them. Now moving on through the world skills, if you want, you can be a vampire with this, but I would highly suggest not to, especially when you're solo playing. I usually unlock both of these for their benefits, and then in the guild, Fighters Guild, make sure you get Intimidating Presence and Banish the Wicked. Banish the Wicked is going to help you with ultimate gen when you're soloing and stuff like that. On the Mages Guild, get all the passives. Onto the Undaunted, you want these 2 passives. You don't need Inner Fire if you're a tank. If you're going to tank stuff, use an Ice Staff heavy attack. Don't worry about this, because this is just gonna take up a space that you can't give up. Alright, moving on to these. You don't need any of these either, so you can just move right down the racials, and you're going to want these here on your racials. Now with crafting, alchemy, you definitely want medicinal use, and with provisioning, get these 2 right here to expand or extend the length of your food use. And that's pretty much it. So let's go ahead and go over the skills on the bar. So on the main bar, we have Frost Clinch. This does a good amount of damage up front, as you can see, and a little bit of extra damage over time. It also immobilizes targets, which is really good, especially when solo playing. Next up, we have Swallow Soul. This is going to do a decent amount of damage, and it's going to heal you, and it's going to give you minor vitality. So you're going to have increased healing on the front bar. This is why we want this here, is to get that increased healing effect. Moving on, we have Bone Shield. Now, somebody asked me in another video, why aren't you using the light armor to get the light armor shield of passive? Well, heavy armor gives you greater resistances. Light armor doesn't. Now, if I was making a light armor tank build, yes, I would definitely go with this shield, trust me. But yeah, this works out really good. Bone Shield is a very powerful shield for you, even though you don't have a really high health. You have enough to give you that greater benefit. And anyone that hits you with a melee attack is going to get 42% of the damage knocked back at them. So, pretty good. The next ability we have is Elemental Drain. This puts Major Breach on the enemy, reducing their spell resistance by 5,280. If you are using a Crusher enchant, you will get an extra 2,000 something, increasing your spell penetration damage. So, really good. And there's another reason why we do the light armor also, is to increase your spell recovery and to increase your reduced cost of magic abilities. You also get Spell Warding, which increases your spell resistance. So, and then last but not least, we have Inner Light on the bar to increase our max Magicka and give us Major Prophecy, increasing our spell critical. These two things are very essential, and that's another reason why you need to fill out the Mages Guild, is so that you can get this passive down here, where for each Mages Guild ability you have slotted, you get a 2% increased max Magicka. With this, we get a 7% increased max Magicka. For having this on our bar, we get a 9% max Magicka. For being a High Elf, we get a 10% max Magicka. And then for our champion points, we get another 20%. We get an insane amount of max Magicka. Our final ability on the bar is an ultimate gen ability, because we're not going to be using this at all. This is just here to generate ultimate. Whenever you kill an enemy, you get 10 ultimate, and that's why we want this here. Now, you can use it for damage. It's a really cheap ultimate. It fires off like crazy if you want to use it, but the back bar ultimate is the one you're going to want to focus on. So onto the back bar, we have Blockade of Storms. This is a lightning blockade. It'll help you set enemies off balance. And because it is the lightning one from Destruction Staff, if you look here, Blockade of Storms has the chance to set enemies off balance kind of thing. But with lightning stuff, you gain extra, like, staff. The lightning staff increases damage done with area of effect abilities. This is an area of effect ability, so it does get 8% increased damage. It also affects this ability, which was Refreshing Path. It gets increased by 8% because it's an area of effect ability. Even though it does it in a path, it still does it in an area of effect. This one will heal you and do damage. So this is kind of like your like why you have so much survivability with this build, is you have a lot of healing coming in, but you also deal a lot of damage. The next ability we have on our bar is Sap Essence. Now this is going to give you Major Sorcery for 20 seconds, increasing your spell damage by 20% when you use it on an enemy. So you want to be close to the enemies before you use this to get that extra spell damage, and this is one of the abilities you want to use first off. When you use this, it heals you also, and it does damage. The next ability to be on our bar is Mirage. Now this is going to give you Minor Ward and Minor Resolve. Now when you cast it, that's what it'll give you, and it lasts for 20 seconds. It also gives you a 15% chance to dodge attacks, so it's kind of a nice bonus. Now Refreshing Path, when you cast this, because of your class, under the Shadow Tree, you will get Shadow Barrier. And Shadow Barrier gives you Major Ward, Major Resolve for 6 seconds, and up to 125% more based on the heavy armor you're wearing. So we're wearing 5 pieces, so you get 125% more to that 6 seconds. And I believe it lasts, yeah, like 13 seconds. So you get 13 seconds of Minor Ward and Major Ward, or Major Ward, Major Resolve. So it increases both your spell and physical resistance. When you have Mirage up and you have your path down, like Mirage up itself will give you 21, but when you put that path down, you go to 26. So this is a really good resistance rate to be at for solo play, and for tanking some normal dungeons and some vet dungeons. It's definitely good to have this much resistance as in Maelstrom Arena. So, alright. So going back into the skills here, let's finish off. We got Inner Light again for increased max Magicka and Major Prophecy again. And then finally, Shooting Star. Now this is going to give you extra max Magicka for the Mages Guild. And that's why on the back bar we actually get increased max Magicka, because we get 4%. And also under the Shadow, for this one, increases your max health by 3% for having one of these. So that's why our health goes up on the back bar and our Magicka goes up, is because of this and this. But this here does a lot of damage over time, and it knocks enemies back. It's a really powerful ability. If you do not want to use this, you can use the Master, or the Destruction Staff, sorry, Ultimate. But either way, they're going to both cost you about the same. Well, one costs you 50 more. And that's why I prefer using this. Now, another one that you can use, which is really good, is Veil of Blades. Now, this does damage, area of effect damage, and it gives you increased physical protection. So you can use this if you want to on the back bar as well. Or you can swap it around and put this, like the Veil of Blades, on the front bar, and you can put this on the back bar. It's really up to you on how you want to do it. We're going to go ahead and use this setup for this one, run, just so you guys can see. So when we're on the front bar, we are getting 5% max Magicka, or 3% max health. So our health should not change when we swap bars, and neither does our Magicka now. So really good kind of setup. Now, before we get into fighting this boss, we're going to go over the champion points. So champion points, very similar to a lot of my other solo builds. 37 in Ironclad, reducing damage taken from direct damage by 15%. 37 in Thick Skin, reducing damage taken from damage over time effects by 15%. 43 into Hardy, reducing physical, poison, disease damage by 10%. And then 43 into Elemental Expert, reducing Flame Frost, Shock, and magic damage by 10%. Now, these do stack with these ones over here, by the way, so just letting you know. Next, we have 16 in Expert Defender, reducing damage taken from light and heavy attacks by 10%. 56 into Bastion, increasing the effectiveness of our damage shields by 20%. We do use Bone Shield a lot, so getting the greater amount out of it is really important. We have 8 into Quick Recovery, increasing our healing received by 2%. We are wearing 5 pieces of heavy armor, so we do get 8% healing received, along with the other 8% on our front bar. That's 16%. We actually have an 18% healing received, which is really good. Moving over here, we have 23 into Warlord. This reduces our break free cost by 10%. We have 20 into Bashing Focus, reducing our bashing cost by 12%, because we do bash with this. We have 75 into Arcanus, increasing our magic recovery by 14%, and 43 into Tenacity, increasing our magic and stamina, or magic return from fully charged heavy attacks by 10%, because we are using a destruction staff. It is actually 40% because you get a 30% base. Moving on over here, we have 23 into Tumbling, reducing our dodge roll cost by 10%, and 56 into Shadow Ward, reducing our block cost by 20%. We do block, and using an ice staff on the front bar will actually help you with this update, because the block cost reduction went to 36%, so this actually gives you a 56% reduced cost, and it's 1730, so basically cut that in half. Alright, moving on, over here, we have 56 into Elfborn, which increases the damage of our healing of your critical strikes and magical abilities by 20%. And I was wrong about the Shadow Ward. This will come off after the block cost from your staff. So you get 36% reduced cost first, and then 20% afterwards. It comes down to about 700, 800 in cost of blocking. So, moving on over here, we have 56 in Elfborn. This increases our critical damage done and healing done by 20%. We have 43 into Elemental Expert, increasing our Flame Frost, Shock, and magic damage done by 10%. And we have 4 into Spell Erosion. Over here, we have 35 into Staff Expert. This increases your light and heavy attack damage done with destruction staffs by 20%. We have 51 into Master at Arms, increasing your direct damage, or your damage done with direct damage by 19%. With using the Fire Staff on the front bar, our lighter heavy attacks are going to be increased by 39%, and with this, it's going to go up to 49%. Now, because we're also a high elf, that fire damage is increased by another 4%, so we actually go to 53% in our light and heavy attacks, or our heavy attacks. In our light attacks, we'll get the same too, in our heavy attacks. So moving on to the back bar, or the final thing, we have 51 into Thaumaturge, increasing our our damage over time done by 19%. And this includes our heavy attack from our Lightning Staff. So our Lightning Staff will get again, 53% increase in damage. So it's pretty nice setup. And that is the CP points for this build, the Reaper. So let's go ahead and see this build in action. We're going to start by taking on these two bosses here, mini boss or world bosses, and we're going to start with trying to kill the bear first. So the first thing you're going to want to do is make sure you're buffed up with your stuff here. And I'm going to go ahead and use the power pots as my thing. So I'm going to go ahead and use this. I'm going to go ahead and pop the power pot. And I'm going to drop down my wall of elements. I'm going to do this. I'm going to flip bars. I'm going to drop down this. I'm going to go ahead and pop my bone shield. And we're going to go ahead and just start doing stuff to kill these guys as quickly as we can. And also hitting this bear with the ice staff also has a chance of applying chilled, which chilled will reduce the damage that he can do to me by a greater amount. So now Bone Shield doesn't work that well with this build because you have such a low stamina already, but you can keep it up pretty well. And we're going to actually use the Veil of Blades now. We're going to go over here and we're going to drop it just like that. And I need to get this guy to stop doing that. Oops, wrong one. Now, Vulcan Skoria is a great ability to use, by the way. Would you stop doing that? You're just making it harder for me to kill this guy. And solo builds are very mobile anyways, so you gotta stay on like the move constantly. And always try to line up your attacks with both the targets if you're fighting two bosses at once. Like I said, lots of bashing with this build. Now this boss is just gonna die really fast. Because they don't have their companion to keep me busy and occupied. There they go. So that's the build in action, and that's how it looks when you're playing it. Like I said, this build is a lot different than some of the other builds I released this update. Mainly because most of the Magicka builds, like some of the Magicka builds, depending on the class, does have their own magic shield, but the Nightblade doesn't. So you kind of need to use either an ice staff for heavy attacks to get the damage shield from it, or you need to do something else on this bar. Now you can take the bone shield off and just use the hardening enchant like I showed you guys, and then you can use another ability here. And another good ability to use would be use Impale, which is your execute, which is going to give you some pretty good damage against things like this, especially when you get to a certain point. But like I said, guys, that is the Reaper build. That is a Nightblade, Magicka Nightblade solo build for Dragon Bones DLC. So You can use, like I said, a fire staff, a lightning staff, but I prefer an ice staff and a lightning staff. It's a lot better combo, and an ice staff and fire staff is a really good one as well. But it's really up to you as a player to decide what staves you want to use. Now remember, if you don't have access to a master Maelstrom staves, you can use crafted staffs to help get you them. Or what I would suggest doing is going and running DSA to get a master staff, run Asylum to get the Asylum staff, and just run those on opposite bars until you can get a Maelstrom staff. But once you get that Maelstrom staff, this build's pretty awesome. So, yes, and I have tested it. If there's a solo build, I've tested it. It's just how I do. So, but that's it. That's the Reaper. Hope you guys like it. If you guys did, hit that like button. If you guys want to see more builds by me or more videos by me, you can hit that subscribe button. Just to let you guys know, I do have other builds coming out this update besides the ones I've already released. It's just that some of these builds I'm fine-tuning, and I'm getting some fine-tune testing done before I release them. And the next one I'm releasing is a bow build. So it's going to use bow on both bars, and that'll be coming out tomorrow. So keep your eyes open for that. That'll be coming out tomorrow. I hope you guys, like this video. Other than that, thanks for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.